Chapter 9 of Babbitt. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Mike Vendetti, MikeVendetti.com. Babbitt by Sinclair Lewis. Chapter 9. 1. Babbitt was fond of his friends. He loved the importance of being host and shouting, "Certainly you're going to have some more chicken. The idea!" And he appreciated the genius of T. Charmalundi Fink. But the vigor of the cocktails was gone, and the more he ate the less joyful he felt. Then the amity of the dinner was destroyed by the nagging of the Swansons. In Floral Heights and the other prosperous sections of Zenith, especially in the young married set, there were many women who had nothing to do. Though they had few servants, yet with gas stoves, electric ranges, and dishwashers, and vacuum cleaners, and tiled kitchen walls, their houses were so convenient that they had little housework, and much of their food came from bakeries and delicatessens. They had but two, one, or no children, and despite the myth that the Great War had made work respectable, their husbands objected to their wasting time and getting a lot of crank ideas in unpaid social work, and still more to their causing a rumor by earning money that they were not adequately supported. They worked perhaps 2 hours a day, and the rest of the time they ate chocolates, went to the motion pictures, went window shopping, went in gossiping twos and threes to card parties, read magazines, thought timorously of the lovers who never appeared, and accumulated a splendid restlessness, which they got rid of by nagging their husbands. The husbands nagged back. Of these naggers the Swansons were perfect specimens. Throughout the dinner Eddie Swanson had been complaining publicly about his wife's new frock. It was, he submitted, too short, too low, too immodestly thin, and much too expensive. He appealed to Babbitt. "Honest, George, what do you think of that rag Louetta went and bought? Don't you think it's the limit?" "What's eating you, Eddie? I call it a swell little dress." "Oh, it is, Mr. Swanson. It's a sweet frock," Mrs. Babbitt protested. "There now, do you see, Smarty? You're such an authority on clothes," Loretta raged, while the guest ruminated and peeped at her shoulders. "It's all right now," said Swanson. "I'm authority enough so I know it was a waste of money, and it makes me tired to see you not wearing out a whole closet full of clothes you got already. I've expressed my idea about this before, and you know good and well you don't pay the least bit of attention. I have to camp on your trail to get you to do anything." There was much more of it, and they all assisted, but Babbitt, everything about him was dim except his stomach, and that was a bright scarlet disturbance. "Had too much grub, oughtn't to eat all stuff," he groaned, while he went on eating, while he gulped down a chill and glutinous slice of ice cream brick and cocoanut cake as oozy as shaving cream. He felt as though he had been stuffed with clay. His body was bursting, his throat was bursting, his brain was hot mud, and only with agony did he continue to smile and shout as became a host of Floral Heights. He would, except for his guests, have fled outdoors and walked off the intoxication of food, but in the haze which filled the room they sat forever, talking, while he agonized. "Darn fool to be eating all this. Not another mouthful," and discovered that he was again tasting the sickly welter of melted ice cream on his plate. There was no magic in his friends. He was not uplifted when Howard Littlefield produced from his treasure house of scholarship the information that the chemical symbol for raw rubber is C10H16, which turns into isoprene, which is 2C5H8. Suddenly, without precedent, Babbitt was not merely bored, but admitting that he was bored. It was ecstasy to escape from the table, from the torture of a straight chair, and loll on the davenport in the living-room. The others, from their fitful, unconvincing talk, their expressions of being slowly and painfully smothered, seemed to be suffering from the toil of social life and the horror of good food as much as himself. All of them accepted with relief the suggestion of bridge. Babbitt recovered from the feeling of being boiled. He won at bridge. He was again able to endure Vergil Gunch's inexorable heartiness. but he pictured loafing with Paul Riesling beside a lake in Maine. It was as overpowering and imaginative as homesickness. He had never been to Maine, yet he beheld the shrouded mountains of the tranquil lake of evening. "That boy Paul's worth all these ballyhoo and highbrows put together," he muttered, "and I'd like to get away from everything." Even Louetta Swanson did not rouse him. Mrs. Swanson was pretty and plain. Babbitt was not an analyst of women, except as to their taste in furnished houses to rent. He divided them into real ladies, working women, old cranks, and fly chickens. He mooned over their charms, but he was of opinion that all of them, save the women of his own family, were different and mysterious. Yet he had known by instinct that Louetta Swanson could be approached. Her eyes and lips were moist, her face tapered from a broad forehead to a pointed chin. Her mouth was thin but strong and avid, and between her brows were two out-curving and passionate wrinkles. She was 30, perhaps, or younger. Gossip had never touched her, but every man naturally and instantly rose to flirtatiousness when he spoke to her, and every woman watched her with stilled blankness. Between games, sitting on the davenport, Babbitt spoke to her with the requisite gallantry, that sonorous Floral Heights gallantry, which is not flirtation, but a terrified flight from it. "You're looking like a soda fountain tonight, Louetta." "Am I?" "Old Eddie kind of on the rampage?"
"Yes, I get so sick of it."
"Well, when you get tired of hubby, you can run off with Uncle George."
"If I ran away, oh, well."
"Anybody ever tell you your hands are awful pretty?" She looked down at them. She pulled the lace of her sleeves over them, but otherwise she did not heed him. She was lost in unexpressed imaginings. Babbitt was too languid this evening to pursue his duty of being a captivating, though strictly moral male. He ambled back to the bridge tables. He was not much thrilled when Mrs. Frink, a small twittering woman, proposed that they try to do some spiritualism and table-tipping. "You know, Chum can make the spirits come. Honest, he just scares me." The ladies of the party had not emerged all evening, but now, as the sex given to things of the spirit while the men warred against base things material, they took command and cried, "Oh, let's—" In the dimness the men were rather solemn and foolish, but the good wives quivered and adored as they sat about the table. They laughed, "Now you be good, or I'll tell," when the men took their hands in the circle. Babbitt tingled with a slight return of interest in life as Louetta Swanson's hand closed on his with quiet firmness. All of them hunched over, intent. They startled as some one drew a strained breath. In the dusty light from the hall they looked unreal. They felt disembodied. Mrs. Gunch squeaked, and they jumped with unnatural jocularity, but at Frank's hiss they sank into subdued awe. Suddenly, incredibly, they heard a knocking. They stared at Frink's half-revealed hands and found them lying still. They wiggled and pretended not to be impressed. Frink spoke with gravity. "Is someone there?" A thud. "Is one knock to be the sign for yes?" A thud. "And two for no?" A thud. "Now, ladies and gentlemen, shall we ask the guide to put us into communication with the spirit of some great one passed over?" Frink mumbled. Mrs. Orville Jones begged, "Oh, let's talk to Dante. We studied him at the reading circle. You know who he was, Orvie?" "Certainly I know who he was. The Wop poet. Where do you think I was raised?" From her insulted husband. "Sure, the fellow that took the Cook's tour to hell. I've never waded through his poetry, but we learned about him at the U," said Babbitt.
"Page, Mr. Dundee," intoned Eddie Swanson. "You ought to get him easy, Mr. Frink, you and he being fellow poets," said Louetta Swanson.
"Fellow poets, rats! Where'd you get that stuff?" protested Vergil Gunch. "I suppose Dante showed a lot of speed for an old-timer. Not that I've actually read him, of course, but to come right down to hard facts, he wouldn't stand a 1, 2, 3 if he had to buckle down to practical literature and turn out a poem for the newspaper syndicate every day like Chum does."
"That's so," from Eddie Swanson. "Those old birds could take their time. Judas Priest, I could write poetry myself if I had